Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on another episode of my interview initiative. Today, I am so grateful that I have Rue here with me. Would you like to just explain a little bit about yourself and what you do, Rue?
Thank you. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to Deakin University and yourself for this opportunity. What you guys are doing for your students is priceless. So, like,
Thank you.
this is great. So, about myself, look, I'm a cybersecurity practitioner who's basically had been in the industry for over 25 years, both in the private and public sector. I basically have worked in many areas of cybersecurity, but most recently in cyber defense management for the Victorian critical infrastructure sector. My biggest thing with what I do is that it's basically making sure that our organizations, especially our critical infrastructure organizations, are as resilient as can be because critical infrastructure essentially sustains human life. You think about everything we need for life: healthcare, water, electricity, all of that kind of stuff. That's what we need, and we need to keep our citizens safe. I've also got a background, aside from cybersecurity and technology, I've also got a background in psychology. So a big part of my interest is actually in the psychology and the human parts of cybersecurity. So it's actually a field called cyber psychology, looking at the psychological drivers of the malicious actors behind the cyber attacks, as well as the impacts on our incident first responders, because we need to keep them as mentally and uh, you know, psychologically safe as possible. But my biggest thing at the moment is to also just basically contribute back to the society because we've got a huge amount of talent coming through, and I want them to know how absolutely what an amazing field it is, and that they are in good hands.
I think incident response is such an amazing field as well because you are both reacting to what's going on, but also thinking into the future as well. And you've got that human element too of physically protecting people and also considering the psychology behind it as well. And I love that duality. That's such a fascinating part of IR that draws me to it, especially. I wanted to ask you what inspired you to specialize in cyber incident response management from psychology.
Well, the thing is that incident response management has always been like a natural state for me. It's always been part of me even before I realized it was called incident
Mm-hmm.
response. Like throughout my life, I'd always just naturally want to jump in whenever a situation was getting out of control and it needed to be handled. One of those people that's never stood back and just gone, somebody should be doing something on that. And I've never suffered with the what's called the bystander effect, which is basically
Mm-hmm.
a psychological phenomenon where individuals are less likely to help a victim when other people are present at that time of crisis. So, just as an example, as I was growing up, I grew up in South Africa, and I was a lifesaver on Durban Beach. Thereafter, in every role that I've ever had, I've always been a first aider or first responder in some capacity. So, when it came to cybersecurity, I always wanted to be in a situation where I realize that, like, look, it's not a matter of if something's going to go wrong, it's
Mm-hmm.
when something's going to go wrong, and
Yeah.
then put it in the structures to make sure that, like, yeah, we are prepared for it and we can basically bring ourselves back to a controlled state. So, incident response has always been a natural state for me.
Was there a particular moment that you decided to go from auditing to defense and incident response management?
There wasn't any particular moment, but it was essentially a series of events. Like, look, cybersecurity auditing is an amazing, absolutely amazing, awesome field. And I encourage all your colleagues to consider it because you get open to a world that you didn't even realize. You get to basically work with some of the biggest brains in the industry, and you get to basically review cybersecurity practices and basically use your building expertise to essentially enhance them and uplift them. The thing that did get to me is that like cybersecurity auditors need to be independent of the operation. So even though I could see all of these problems, I couldn't jump in and fix them, and that's
Yeah.
something that I just thought was holding me back.
Yeah.
So when I began to see the levels and the sophistications of cyber attacks actually increasing, it basically, pinged at my natural state to want to use my expertise to reduce the risk, but also protect our citizens.
Yeah.
And that's why basically I felt, hey, look, I feel better in defense management, but specifically incident response management. Yeah.
I think that especially for, the students that we have at Deakin University, it's that wanting to get your hands dirty and wanting to protect people that is really important. It's that sense of community, right? And, that continuous improvement towards better cyber outcomes and better safety outcomes. One thing that I really want to ask you is, were there any mentors or influences really early in your career that helped you towards where you are now?
Fully, absolutely, fully. But without mentioning all of their names, the things that the cybersecurity practitioners that I met early in my career were the best mentors that you could ever ask for. And none of these were actually formal mentoring relationships. They were just basically co-workers or colleagues that became friends. Things that I was back then, I was actually new to the cybersecurity field, and I obviously, understandably, had a very foundation level of knowledge. However, these cybersecurity practitioners, they always made time for me and always made time for my questions and let me leverage off their expertise. They also always kept encouraging me and kept keeping me in a positive headspace. They included me everywhere as a peer, even though they were way more senior than what I was, right? And I owe my entire professional life to them. So I've always paid it forward since. Like, it's incredible for me to now basically be presenting, be mentoring and that, and see upcoming practitioners thrive when they know that they're supported, but also when they know that it's safe to step out of your comfort zone. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think mentorship is such a beautiful aspect of this industry. As soon as I came into this industry, the openness to the openness of industry professionals to put aside time, like you mentioned, to answer questions, even if they are the busiest person that they will still put that time aside. And that has been, some of those conversations have been the most insightful conversations that I have had and the most eye-opening. So any student that is watching this, I highly recommend, if you see someone come across your LinkedIn and you know that they're active in the industry and you're thinking, I have a question for that person, I really want to start a conversation, just send a message to them. Because I promise you, and obviously Rue, you've experienced this as well, they will more often than not be happy to answer any questions you have. It's such an amazing industry. Another question that I want to ask you is, you've obviously done this for a very long time. I'm sure you've seen some shifts and changes in the way that things have happened and new technologies that are coming out. What would you say, in your opinion, were the most significant changes that you've seen in cybersecurity?
Well, it's been over the last 25 plus years, it's actually been huge, right? There's been a momentous amount of changes. The biggest ones were like NATO actually ratifying that cyberspace is the domain where the conflicts of the future are going to be held, like in extensions to the traditional land, sea, and air, which basically means that cyber attacks are now part of conventional conflicts or warfare. Right? That is huge. The other side of it is the recognition that cybersecurity is actually a human problem. It's not a technology-specific problem that can be resolved with just technical solutions. We've got cyber criminals that, they do basically try to get us to compromise us. But the things that they are using psychological manipulation and deception techniques to trick people into revealing sensitive information, granting unauthorized access, following rogue instructions in a typical fashion. Yeah, that does lead to like data theft, financial losses, and all that kind of stuff. But in the critical infrastructure sector, that actually can lead to our citizens, their lives being compromised
Yeah.
because of things that like these are the systems that actually support life. In incident response management, we also have cyber first responders that are responding to these incidents all the time. We need to look after their
Mm-hmm.
well-being. So at least there's more recognition that like we need to basically keep on top of how our responders are doing. Are they resilient? And basically just make sure that they're not burning out, they're not getting stressed. The other side of the other changes that's happened over time is that the intensity and the speed and magnitude of cyber attacks has blown up. Biggest part of that is because of things like automation and AI.
Mm-hmm.
The rise of AI, especially, like gives both attackers and defenders a lot of tools. Things that like the sophistication of those tools also makes previously low skilled attackers. It actually makes them a risk.
Mm-hmm.
And the biggest thing most recently is deepfake technology. Just
Yeah.
how
Yeah.
advanced it's getting that we actually have problems making sense of like, okay, what is actually a real identity, what's actually not. That's only going to proliferate. It's only going to get worse. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think with the rise of AI as well, we've, as defenders, have had to adapt so much to that.
Hmm.
And even just things like the tools that we use and the frameworks that we use are updating and changing all the time to match that sort of progress on the other side. Are there any main tools or frameworks that you rely on in your current role?
I actually feel like I don't even need to answer that question because you've just answered it yourself. The whole thing is the technologies, the tools, the resources that are changing all the time. Like professional and technical resources for cybersecurity like evolve continuously. So if I had to give you any kind of specific present day resource and that kind of, it's guaranteed to not age well at all, right? That alone actually demonstrates just how quickly cybersecurity evolves, how
Mm-hmm.
much of that there is, right? So for any cybersecurity practitioner, I know that this is not what they want to hear because they want to hear download this and install that or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will tell them, and it won't be apparent to them now, but it will be apparent to them in 10, 15, 20 years, is that your biggest tools that you're going to be using to be masters in this field is your professional curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Cybersecurity practitioners are not people that run around with a little checklist and just do what's on the checklist. It's people who basically want to basically investigate and know more and know what was the actual cause and do I actually have the actual solution for long-term strategy. The psychological ability to think like a criminal, right? In
Mm-hmm.
order to actually thwart the criminal. Keeping a solutions focused approach rather than a tools focused approach. What that means is that when you see a problem, you basically have to go, okay, fine, this is the problem, this is the outcome I want to get to, and this is basically how I need to do things. Yeah, I can use tools, but tools are not the be all and end all. The
Mm-hmm.
things that like I need to use my brain to come up with the actual solution, and then you use the tools around me to get to that solution. You have to be dedicated to constant learning and that. But the biggest tool I would say for a cybersecurity practitioner is the ability to keep calm, keep cool, and have a collective mind, especially when things are going bad.
Yeah, I actually recently posted a TikTok about if you're in the middle of an incident, just take 5 minutes, step outside, go for a walk, because even
Mhm.
just getting that mental clarity could be the difference between going around in circles and finding a solution to the problem. So, yeah, some really fantastic skills there. I know our students are so keen to know what sort of skills that they would need to succeed. So I have to ask, what are the key skills that you would say are needed to succeed in a cyber role for students who are currently developing these skills in university?
In in cybersecurity, I would say that like one of the key skills is that you have to have really good analytical and problem solving skills.
Mm-hmm.
You need to basically like be dedicated to finding the answer, and that is not just going through a checklist, but that's basically investing yourself to finding the answer. Part of that, and a biggest part of that, is actually your personal resilience and psychological fortitude.
Mm-hmm.
You need to basically be able to manage that. This is a field where that actually becomes one of the most important tools in your toolbox. Your proactive and inquisitive mindset. One of the biggest things is actually your communication skills, your ability to explain complex concepts in plain, simple terms.
Yeah.
Right? Your adaptability and your attention to detail is always going to be amazing, but your diligence and persistence is what's going to be something that basically holds you on, because that's exactly what your adversaries
Mm-hmm.
are holding to.
Yeah, I think that in university we develop so many great skills, but I think those sort of behavioral skills are where you really shine. That's sort of the meshing of the technical side and the human side coming together in these beautiful skills that we develop over time. I One thing that I've experienced, at least when I was in my education journey, was sort of feeling like I was a bit too, like I said before, a small fish in a big pond. So
Yeah,
I want to ask, in your career path, would you say that you ever felt any of that imposter syndrome?
yeah. Uh, in fact, imposter syndrome is a very common problem across STEM, but specifically in cybersecurity, yes, it's
Mm-hmm.
a big problem, and it also occurs at all career levels. It's not only entry. It's not any area. You're not going to ever hit a point where you're just going to go, yeah, I feel fine now.
Yeah.
No, it's it's it. But it's also due to the field's like fast-paced,
Mm-hmm.
constant changing nature, high-pressure environment, and the vast amount of knowledge and the evolution of knowledge that's required. And that leads many people, even the most senior people, to feel like they're imposters or frauds,
Yeah.
right? In spite or despite of the huge pool of evidence that shows their competence, they're still going to feel that.
Yeah.
So yeah,
So say I'm a student and I've just entered the workforce and I'm feeling a bit of that imposter syndrome, working with some really fantastic people. Do you have some advice for students who may be experiencing that maybe in their studies or when they have just entered the workforce?
yeah, and I'll tell them exactly what I've done and what I've seen some of the really great practitioners do. Is that you need to, and it's going to sound counterintuitive, but you need to actually embrace your imposter syndrome.
Mm,
Right? You need to embrace it because it's going to keep you on your toes. At the same time, you also need to find healthy ways to manage your imposter syndrome so it doesn't consume you.
yeah.
So whilst imposter syndrome is typically viewed as negative, there's actually lots of positive things. So the positive things are like increased motivation. You basically, when the practitioner feels that they don't have the level of skill that they actually need, right? They'll actually go out to try to learn and develop those skills and that's a good thing. Continuous learning, like when you actually recognize when you what you don't know, you basically go out and try to basically connect those dots.
Yeah.
Interpersonal skills, it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but like when you basically feel that you actually don't know something, you're actually forced to basically go out and collaborate with other people, work with
Mm-hmm.
other people, learn how to work with other people. That's a really great thing. But also humility, like self-doubt is actually a healthy contradiction or contrast to overconfidence, right? So these are all really great things, but the important side of it is that you need to basically be aware of the mental health costs.
Yeah.
Mental health cost is that, like, if you basically allow your imposter syndrome to grow unchecked, you are going to deal with high levels of anxiety, stress, burnout. Like, you're going to have cognitive distortion where you're going to start doing things like discounting your achievements but over generalizing your failures, which is going to make you you're gonna struggle to take a compliment because you feel I'm actually not that good. But the minute something goes wrong or you feel that you're being criticized, you're going to, you know, just blow it up in your mind.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, you also need to keep your self checked, because you don't want to basically be in a situation where you feel so overwhelmed that you almost start self doubting and you start questioning everything that you're
Yeah.
doing, even though you are gold star professional. The biggest thing with imposter syndrome is that, like, it's works on a spectrum. It's not a black and white thing, right? So the whole thing with it is that it is common. A lot of practitioners have it. You don't have to feel like you're alone, but it does come down to you recognizing it and then managing it.
Yeah.
And it's fine. It's all okay.
It will all be okay in the end. That's at the end of the day, it's okay. Everyone has something new that they learn every day. So, at whatever level that is at. I want to pivot a little bit here. I want to ask you, what do you think are some misconceptions about cybersecurity that you encounter regarding working in the industry?
Well, even though it's been, I've been in the industry for over 25 years, there's a few misconceptions that still seem to hang around. And the biggest one is that, like, cybersecurity is only about being technical and knowing
Mm-hmm.
tools.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that I really try to snap people out of, because what cybersecurity really is that it's a specialist field where you apply your skills and your knowledge to manage risks to an acceptable level, right? And it really involves knowing frameworks, processes, people, and behaviors, and implementing solutions to basically make sure that they all function securely, right? Tools may be used for the outcome, but they're not the be all and end all.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's the first thing. The other misconception is that threats are always external, and this is also something that's perpetuated by our media. The whole thing is that whenever someone shows an attacker, it's always this guy in a hoodie
Yes.
sitting somewhere in a garage.
It
Now,
always
from
is.
from an attack point of view, from a cyber attacker point of view, I don't know why we always cold. I don't know why, but
Yeah.
we always end up putting. But, like, the reality is that insider threats still are a significant risk. That's actually
Mm-hmm.
the majority of risks are actually from insider threats. Human error is a leading cause of breaches, right? So awareness training is basically a critical part of this. The other side of it is also that people still believe that cybersecurity, well, they're starting to snap out of it, but they believe that cybersecurity is the responsibility of the cybersecurity or the IT department, where truth, it's actually a shared
Yeah.
responsibility. Everyone in the organization has a responsibility towards keeping the organization safe, keeping the citizens safe. So yeah, those are the key misconceptions that I've come across.
Speaking of threat actors in their little hoodies in their dark basements in Russia, um, I have to ask, what would you say is the most notable way that threat actor behavior specifically has changed over time since you started working in the field?
Well, threat, threat actors or cyber threats have basically evolved from really relatively simple, unsophisticated attacks to, like, highly complex, organized, widespread operations. So it's basically shifted from individual focused attacks to
Mm-hmm.
more structured cybercrime as a service ecosystems, right? The global footprint. So if we had to rewind back to, when I started, the complexity initially, hey, very low complexity, very simple attacks. Nowadays, it's highly sophisticated attacks leveraging automation and AI. Who were they targeting in the early days? It was just individuals and smaller businesses with low levels of security. Nowadays, it's larger organizations, it's critical infrastructures, it's entire nations. What were their motivations? Earlier days, it was personal gain, curiosity, maybe a bit of notoriety. Nowadays, it's financially driven or actually, nation state war like
Yeah.
objectives. The attack vectors early on, yeah, it was pretty basic. Nowadays, it's advanced ransomware, advanced DDoS, living off the land, living off the sites. The methodologies and the ecosystems before were pretty like just individual, whereas nowadays it is a very, very much, cybercrime as a service type specialist platform. So yeah, things have basically evolved in a very, very short space of time
Yeah.
to a very sophisticated entity.
It's been so, I mean, I haven't been in the industry for that long, but I can imagine it's been so interesting seeing it go from this sort of, yeah, like in the basement kind of career to being like you're being paid by the government to make
Yes.
these really sophisticated pieces of malware. And it seems very lucrative, and there's a lot that someone can gain out of it, which just means that we obviously need to work equally as hard to protect our community, and put in the guardrails to prevent them from impacting us. How would you how do you see cybersecurity evolving in the next decade now, looking into the future?
Well, look, over the last few years, and that you can't go to any event or any conference without basically coming across mentions of AI or like advanced computing and that. So it's already apparent that agentic AI will become the new attack and defense frontier, right?
Yeah.
So both attackers and defenders are going to be using autonomous or agentic AI systems for their work, right? Those are the systems that basically need minimal or no human interaction. And like the things that they're already showing just how formidable they can be. The next thing is that quantum computing. So is quantum computing at one stage was just theoretical, and now it's going to be used on higher scales of attack. So
Mm-hmm.
compromising controls like encryption is going to increase the risk of unauthorized access, right? More sophisticated deepfake or synthetic media, right? So the differences between genuine and fake will be significantly harder to see, and our standard detection methods are going to struggle to basically identify those. The attack surface also in the future is going to be a lot bigger as we introduce more, Internet of Things, more device proliferation. We can basically going to have more connections coming into our systems. If these systems are vulnerable or if these systems are misconfigured, it actually makes the risk higher of being compromised. So that is basically what the next evolution is.
Yeah. And it's so fascinating because especially with the agentic AI approach, we had that Anthropic espionage campaign recently, and we've had this Grok generative AI thing about generating images. Like some of these images these days, I come across them on my Facebook feed and my LinkedIn feed, and they look pretty legitimate to me, but everyone in
Yeah.
the comments is like, oh, this is AI, this is AI. It's getting really difficult to differentiate between what's real and what's fake. So it's definitely going to be very interesting from a cybersecurity professional perspective, how that's going to evolve and develop. Because, yeah, we're already sort of seeing the start of it. And it just makes you wonder, what the next 10 years is going to look like. And hopefully by then we'll have some amazing newcomers, some new students who are already just killing it in the industry that will be able to defend
Like
against
Paige
that.
Haines. Yes,
Yes,
exactly.
exactly, exactly. Speaking of newcomers, I need to ask, what
Hmm.
would you say are the biggest mistakes that we may make in our first position?
Okay, on the positive, I love the enthusiasm that newcomers bring when they come into the industry. It's amazing to see, and I absolutely love it, right? But where things basically do trip up is that newcomers often neglect foundational concepts. They only focus on tools instead of cybersecurity principles, and they fail to reinforce their hands-on experience, right? So let's break it into a few different sections, right? So we'll do three sections. The first one is technical and foundational mistakes. So they neglect the fundamentals. Often newcomers, they basically get caught up in this whole Hollywood concept of I want to do hacking. So they want to basically do hacking without understanding the core concepts of cybersecurity, risk management, networking, architecture,
Yeah.
psychology, right? Or things like the CIA triad, confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And they basically then just get lost in that thing of just wanting to be the hacker, be the guy
Mm-hmm.
in on the movies and that, right? The next thing is that they only focus on tools. They're preoccupied with whatever tools are available instead of actually grasping the underlying principles and understanding the real life application of those tools. Whereas you're supposed to be figuring out how to come up with a solution and
Yeah.
then use
Yeah.
it instead of being focused on the tools. The other side of it is not practicing, like basically failing to get the hands-on experience through the labs, through the practice environments, and that. And even when they do get it, instead of reinforcing those, they just basically go, "Okay, fine, I've done this. I
Yeah.
managed to
You've checked
be
the
successful."
box.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas the focus should actually be making sure that you know it so well that you never get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
The next side of it is the career and professional mistakes, right? Not staying updated. So once you basically get a skill, you don't keep on practicing, you don't evolve that skill, and you basically then lose the skill. Chasing certifications without practical knowledge. So lots of people like to get a whole bunch of certifications behind the names, but without the practical knowledge, it basically fails. It
Mm-hmm.
becomes counterproductive. Delaying job applications. So they will get onto the job sites and they'll have a look at the application at the criteria, but they'll basically go, "Oh, I don't think I can do that," or "This looks too hard," and they basically talk themselves out of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the other side of it is what we said, like, is not prioritizing the soft skills. Like, technical skills are crucial, but the ability to communicate, the ability to actually work with other people, like that's actually a real skill. The next thing that newcomers do, newcomers are really enthusiastic, but they try to be jacks of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
And they try to basically know everything in cybersecurity, which is actually to their detriment because they run themselves really thin and they don't really develop any really deep specialist skills.
Yeah.
The other side of it is not documenting their work. I know documentation is boring and it's basically to a lot of people, but if you can't actually document and articulate what you've actually done, you're not able to actually reinforce it in your mind. And you're also not able to actually refer to it back when you're now in the situation again and you need to apply that knowledge. The next one, the last one actually, is a psychological or mindset mistake. It's like crippling by comparison. A lot of the newcomers get into the field and then they start comparing themselves to each other and they start not only looking at the next person, but the perception that they have of the next person, and they
Mm-hmm.
basically feel less than, the imposter syndrome, but they become crippled by that, right? They want to become a cybersecurity absolutist, where they feel that cybersecurity is the most important thing in the world. Everything has to be security based, and that's unrealistic. They need to basically balance themselves with, hey, we need to look at what the risk is and then manage the risk, not kill everything in the name of cybersecurity.
Yeah. I
So yeah,
definitely, mindset is so important. And I think a lot of students can get so tunnel visioned in study and just studying without realizing that you have to kind of nurture yourself a little bit as well. Take on like all the technical things that you're learning is really fantastic. But like you said, having that reflective mindset and taking notes and really understanding why am I learning this, how does this help me, what skills do I gain, and how can those skills gained be implemented in a role or in my next role?
Apply those skills.
Exactly.
Because not everything is not you can have all the skills in the world, but not everything is on a checklist. You basically have to know that, hey, here's your realm of skills.
Mm,
A new situation has come up. Now how do I basically apply that
mm-hmm.
knowledge to this new situation? Yeah.
Yeah. I want to ask as well. So I obviously spoke about, students getting really into their studies, and all of that sort of stuff, but I feel like so much of the growth happens outside of study. So I wanted to ask you, what would you recommend that students engage in to gain more practical experience outside of their degree?
Well, I'd say like, okay, when I give the first point, people are basically going to go, oh, who's going to give me a job? The thing is that people need to just listen carefully. Like, there's professional and academic experience. So I'd say go out and seek internships wherever you can. Just basically seek them and find some kind of company that can give you that real world experience. But at the same time, one way of doing that is actually volunteer your time, right? So find non-profits or find local businesses that may not have the ability to, pay for those skills. But the thing is that, like, go and do it. In doing it, you actually are working in a real life business and you are building and uplifting those skills. Work with your university, like even before you leave, get a job in your university's IT department, even get a job being a tutor in courses that like you can basically get into and that, right? Leverage your faculty and your mentors. A lot of the guys are basically working in, they're doing research and development, or they're doing some kind of work that actually needs real life experience. Go and offer your time there. The next one there is like your skills based or professional development. Like you have your online training platforms. There's tons of platforms online that help you develop real skills with things like security operations centers or SOCs,
Yeah.
right? Again, and I know this is boring, but document your work. Like anything that you learn, just write it down, document. But that actually takes me to the next thing of hands-on projects, right? So build yourself a home lab. But the one thing I do tell people about building a home lab is that don't just build it and then look at it. No, the whole thing is that before you actually pick up the first piece of hardware, think about what do I want to achieve with this home lab. Write it down. What's your top 3 or 5 objectives? And only once you have that right in front of you, then you build your home lab because you're building it to achieve those objectives.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just another person that's built their own computer. Good for you. But participate in things like your capture the flag events. Those are really good because it basically gives you a good insight into real life events, or just gives you the opportunity to leverage and apply your knowledge to a new type of situation. Open source projects, or taking on personal projects, or joining bounty programs. Those are good things. Like basically get onto the online forums, see who's actually running an open source project, or see who's running a bounty project, or even things like your personal projects. Think about when you go out and network with your colleagues, and that what is something that everyone seems to be missing. Can I basically build it? And then when you do, then go and market it to someone. I put it across to someone. Maybe that is a good way of actually like just getting your foot in.
Mm-hmm.
But those are good practical ways of actually building real life skills.
One of my favorite ways of sort of encompassing those points is to make a portfolio website. Because going back to, documentation and, reflection, having a place to sort of display your projects and what you're learning, both on the technical and soft skills side, can really showcase who you are as a person. And who knows, your portfolio website could be a resource for other students. If you're making guides for example, I've got a guide on how to use John the Ripper and a guide on how to make your own GitHub Pages portfolio website. No, definitely not promoting that, but there are so many resources that students can use, including, my portfolio website, or books, or we've got, like LinkedIn Learning, online courses that you can do. I want to ask, are there any particular resources that you relied on or have found during your career that you would recommend to students or industry newcomers?
Okay, so like exactly what we said before is that like professional and technical resources, especially in cybersecurity, are evolving all the time. They're just continuously evolving. So any specific present day resource is guaranteed to absolutely fall apart, right? Not age well. So I'll I'll give you my own perspective, my own background, right? First thing that we need to know as cybersecurity professionals is that cybersecurity is not just one job type. Cybersecurity is actually an umbrella term for a broad field, which has a number of specializations, subspecializations, super specializations, right? So, what I'd actually tell people if they really want to succeed is to, hey, the emerging practitioner must identify the specialist field that they have a true innate passion for, right?
Mm-hmm.
And for that, you really need to be honest with yourself. You really need to know, like, hey, what really calls out to me? Because once you have a natural passion for a field, you just inherently seek it out. You just can't help it, right? Next, you basically need to look for the professional bodies that deal with that field. So, for example, myself, my professional areas of interest is cybersecurity or defense management and psychology.
Mm-hmm.
So psychology, right? So the bodies that I'd look out for are the Australian Information Security Association, which is ASA or ISACA, the Australian Psychology Society, Institute of Criminology, Institute of Professional Intelligence Officers, right? So I basically attach myself to those organizations and keep on top of like what's happening in that space. The next thing I do is I attend conferences and networking get-togethers in these professional interests. So for myself, I'd be going to cybersecurity conferences like CyberCon or psychology conferences like the Cyber Psychology Conference that happened earlier this year in Sydney, right? Then using the above, I would build and leverage my network. But that's a two-way thing. That's the two-way relationship. You find your peers that are more senior than you and you basically learn from them, but you also have to give something back. You also have to help them in their initiatives. The most important one, though, is to self-audit. What self-audit means is that you need to, as you go through this process, you need to always check in on yourself to see, hey, is this something that I'm really enjoying? This is still a field that I really find fascinating, because the minute you stop enjoying the field is the minute you stop actually having your natural instincts for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is there something that you think students overlook that you think would really help them grow in the industry?
In the cybersecurity industry, it's going to sound counterintuitive, but one of the biggest skills that the new practitioners should really strive for are the soft skills, and these are critical in cybersecurity because they bridge the gap between your technical knowledge and your human interactions. Right? So your key skills your key soft skills are basically going to be communication, translating complex concepts into clear, actionable, plain language, for executives and non-technical people.
Mm-hmm.
Being a critical thinker and problem solving, evaluating complex threats, and making really good judgments in high pressure environments. Teamwork and collaboration. Like cybersecurity is not a team sport. There's a lot of people who want to be the hero, the man, right? But at the end of the day, you realize that you have to work with diverse teams. You have to basically work as a team to deliver that outcome. Your adaptability, nothing is ever going to be given to you in a checklist. You basically have to use your skills, know it by second nature, and be able to adapt it to the situation in front of you. Having emotional intelligence, being able to understand what your triggers are, when are you feeling stressed, but also the people around you, the team around you, what are their stresses, what are their basically breaking points in that, and be able to navigate around that. Demonstrating leadership, right? It's great that you have the technical skills, but if you are not able to guide strategic direction, mentor your junior staff, basically lead to the outcome. It's only one part of the puzzle, but also just holding ethical integrity. In cybersecurity, you are going to be exposed to a lot of very classified, very sensitive data, and there is a responsibility on you to maintain that trust.
Mm-hmm.
And that is something that you need to have inherent within you.
Yeah. And I think integrity is so important, in particularly for newcomers, especially, yeah, like you said, if you are dealing with, that highly sensitive information, or even just personal information, personal situations. Yeah, anything really goes in cybersecurity. One question that I love asking all of my guests, because it's always such an insightful answer for every single person that I've asked this. If you could give one piece of advice to your younger self at the start of your career, what would that single piece of advice be?
Well, the single piece of advice will always
Or more
be
than one piece of advice, whatever, however much advice you want to give yourself.
yeah, no, well, the thing is that like there's actually a huge amount of wisdom and power in the saying that if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're in the wrong room.
Yeah.
Because if you stay in this room, the only thing that's going to grow is your ego, not your knowledge.
Yeah.
But I would tell myself that I need to find a better room in order to do a few things in order to grow. Because the thing is that like if I surround myself with those more knowledgeable or more skilled than myself, my ability to actually grow and better myself is going to be that much more possible. The complacency that I'm going to avoid. So I need to avoid complacency. I need to stop having a false sense of security that, hey, I am the hero, the man, the most knowledgeable in that, and be able to basically keep myself in a state where I need to learn more and stay competitive. But I also need to learn new perspectives. The whole thing is that, like, by being in better rooms, you get the unique knowledge and experience of professionals that have basically dealt with tons and tons of really complex issues and problems, but each one of them have dealt with it in different ways, and
Mm-hmm.
it adds to your portfolio, it adds to your skill set. And that's what I tell myself. Get yourself into better rooms.
I think that's the beauty of cybersecurity, and what I'm seeing in education, the tertiary space, is you have so many students from so many different backgrounds, and diverse perspectives and diverse problem solving is so important. Because if you become an echo chamber, then you miss information that someone from a different background might have picked up on. So that knowledge sharing, and bringing in new people, from different areas, is just so important to our collective growth as a society. And at the end of the day, so long as we're 1% better at protecting the general public, then we've done a good job. So, well, that was my last question. So a huge thank you to you, Rue.